Have you ever found yourself in a relationship that totally throws the standard fairy tale narrative right out the window? You know the kind, the connections where it doesn't just feel like you've met someone new, but more like your entire psychological foundation is being completely rewritten? Well, if you've ever wondered why some relationships feel less like traditional love and a whole lot more like a total consuming transformation, you are absolutely not alone. For some people, love is essentially this intense psychological alchemy. And today, we're going to unpack exactly why that happens through a very specific, really fascinating lens. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a profoundly transformative placement in Vedic astrology, Venus in the 8th house. Now, whether you're totally well-versed in astrology or you're just, trying to make sense of your own wild relationship patterns, the concepts we're exploring today offer an incredibly revealing mirror. We are going to explore the very real alchemy of attachment that this placement represents. All right, part 1. The alchemy of attachment, setting the stage for intense love. So Venus in the 8th house is a placement where love is just inextricably tied to transformation, loss, and deep, deep psychological connection. I mean, this isn't just about finding a partner to share casual Sunday brunches with, right? This placement intrinsically links love to psychological bonding on a massive scale. It creates an environment where relationships are just emotionally consuming. Think about it. When Venus, the planet of love and attachment, sits in the 8th house, which is all about profound change and hidden depths, the result is this intense emotional desire that demands absolutely everything from you. Moving right along to section 2, craving deep emotional intimacy, the draw to complexity. What's really fascinating about these first few tendencies we see with this placement is that you don't just want romance. You literally crave deep emotional merging. Superficial connections, small talk, those rarely, if ever, satisfy, because you're seeking absolute depth. And this intense need for a transformative connection leads to forming highly private, incredibly intense bonds that are notoriously difficult to detach from later on. You might even find yourself naturally drawn to emotionally complicated or maybe even unavailable partners. And why is that? Well, it's because the subconscious is actually seeking out a connection that requires a psychological excavation. You're drawn to the complexity because for you, that is exactly where the deepest bonding happens. Okay, on to section 3, the crucible of intense love, when love becomes consuming. Now, the crucial thing to understand about these next tendencies is the extreme vulnerability they create. Once a bond is formed, a really profound emotional dependency can take root. For someone with this placement, emotional security and affection become heavily linked to their very own self-worth. And, as you can imagine, when your self-worth is tied to another person, it breeds intense vulnerability. This manifests as subtle and, let's be real, sometimes not so subtle insecurities. A very real fear of emotional abandonment starts to arise. There's this constant underlying anxiety around being left behind or emotionally replaced. So, love essentially creates the fear of its own absence. And this brings up a brilliantly stark point. For this placement, pleasure and pain are often two sides of the exact same coin. These relationships carry such beautiful, deep affection, but they also carry overwhelming emotional intensity. You really can't separate the joy of the bond from the anxiety of its depth. It's this all-consuming experience where the highs and the lows are completely, permanently intertwined. Which brings us to section 4, when love lingers on, the aftermath of separation. If you've lived through this, you already know that a breakup almost never actually severs the bond. It perfectly explains those lingering tendencies we often see where there is immense difficulty with emotional separation long after the physical relationship has ended. Why? Because old relationships remain emotionally vivid in your memory for a huge amount of time. Your mind just holds on to the psychological depth of that person. The physical dynamic may be firmly in the past, sure, but the emotional reality, it's still sitting right there with you in the present. And finally, section 5, transformation through true detachment, the ultimate lesson. I know, it sounds absolutely exhausting, doesn't it? But actually, scratch that. This intensity isn't just happening for the sake of drama. These consuming experiences are literally designed to act as a mechanism for transformation. They completely reshape your emotional patterns and your baseline desires, slowly forcing you to learn the critical, life-altering difference between mere attachment and genuine affection. It really all boils down to comparing these two core concepts. Emotional attachment is what you usually start with, right? It's rooted in craving that high, the drama, the merging, and possessing the other person just to feel secure. But genuine affection, that's the evolutionary goal here. That is rooted in true connection and developing the self-awareness to love someone completely without any need for possession. It's the journey of moving from a love that consumes to a love that simply exists and appreciates. So, as you look back at your own relationship patterns, I'd love for you to ask yourself honestly, is your attachment rooted in true connection, or are you maybe just chasing the feeling of intensity? The alchemy of Venus in the 8th house is undeniably tough, but it's meant to strip away the illusion of possession so you can finally experience what it means to truly, genuinely love. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.